We are with you all the way. God bless you all. That will conclude our coverage here. Of course, we'll be looking at the implications of all of this as, for example, the count goes on in Florida, and they hope to resolve and get an election that ended a week ago, plus to finally end. Fox continues.
And a Fox News alert, President Trump set to land shortly in California this Saturday to survey the damage, see the governor there, along with those whose lives have been changed forever by these wildfires. 74 people dead, more than 1,000 people missing as a result of the wildfires. They continue to burn on the northern and southern part of California, noon Eastern here in Washington. Welcome to America's News Headquarters. Air Force One lands in about 45 minutes. Nice to be with you. I'm Leland Vittert.
And I'm Jillian Turner. We've got team coverage right off the top of the raging California wildfires and the race against the clock to save lives. Jonathan Hunt's standing by now in Malibu, but first to White House correspondent Kevin Corke. He's covering the president's trip this weekend. Kevin joins us live from Paradise. Kevin.
Jillian, you're right. For the president, this is just a chance, obviously, to see the devastation firsthand caused by these unbelievable wildfires that have absolutely scorched a number of communities here in northern and over in southern California as well. It's also a chance for him to comfort those who lost not only loved ones, but in many cases lost their belongings and literally everything that they had in their possession. But also during this trip, it's a chance for the president to thank firefighters and first responders who have the heavy burden of assisting a very hurting community. The president, as you know, Jillian, has been quite critical of the state's management of its land, which he says is a very big reason why California keeps getting hammered by fires year after year after year. In fact, he addressed that controversy with our Chris Wallace of Fox News Sunday.
You got some blowback because one of your tweets said there's poor forest management.
Only because I tell the truth. When trees fall, they get very dry. They're like tinder, they're like matchsticks, right? You got to remove them. You got to remove them.
What about the argument it's climate change, that it's drier, it's hotter, and that's contributing to it?
Maybe it contributes a little bit. The big problem we have is management.
Indeed, from the management perspective, there is a numeric element to this. Since 2005, Jillian, the federal government has granted California, by way of FEMA, some $6 billion in wildfire management and wildfire mitigation. And so what the president is essentially saying here is we can not only make it safer for people on the ground if we simply do more to better manage the land where these fires tend to spring up. But it's obviously a conversation that will lead to many more chances of dialogue while he is here on the ground, including with the governor and the governor-elect. More on that coming up in our next hour. But for now, back to you.
Well, Kevin, thanks for that. Stay safe out there, and we'll talk to you a little bit later in the show. Leland?
All right. Don't forget to watch Chris Wallace's exclusive interview with President Trump tomorrow, Fox News Sunday. A lot about the wildfires and a lot about a whole lot more. Check your local listings for time and channel. Chris Wallace will then sit down with Howard Kurtz on Media Buzz 11 a.m. Eastern to talk about the interview and debrief as well.
And firefighters in Southern California are finally getting some help from Mother Nature. Cooler temperatures coupled with milder winds are working to contain the deadly Woolsey fire that's now raged for over a week. Jonathan Hunt in Malibu with the latest. Jonathan.
Jillian, good morning to you from Malibu. The president is expected to head to Southern California after he concludes events up north. We don't know his precise schedule when he gets here, but this is the kind of devastation he might be taking a look at. Look down here, this line of homes in the Point Dume neighborhood of Malibu, completely and utterly destroyed. And as we come back to the one we're standing on now, you can just see the kind of damage it's done. There is really nothing left of the house itself. And then you look outside here, these people obviously had a beautiful outdoor patio here, and swinging back to our right, the pool that presumably the kids used to enjoy, the family who lived here. It's going to be a long time before anybody gets to enjoy that again. This is an area which has some millionaires, some celebrities, a lot of ordinary, hard-working Americans too. And as one of the survivors of this fire we talked to nearby here said, these flames do not respect any kind of economic status. They make no difference. Listen here.
Money can't buy you anything if you're here at Point Dume. There's nothing to buy. Everybody, the rich and poor, are standing next to each other, picking through donations, the things they need, toilet paper, paper towels, water. And so it's the great leveler, a disaster like this.
It really is a great leveler. I also want to talk to you a little bit, Gillian, about the capricious nature of these kind of flames. You saw this line of homes I just showed you going that way, all completely destroyed. And then as we swing back this way, one right next door, not touched by the flames at all. And it is just sometimes the luck of the draw. Do those burning hot embers land on your roof? And then again, with this one, you see it's a different kind of roof, not a wood roof, doesn't catch a fire so easily, a more modern build. That makes a big difference. But these neighbors are going to come back here. They have their home to come back to. They're going to find everybody they knew along the street next to them has had their home completely destroyed. It's going to be a very, very long time for this neighborhood and so many others in California to get back to anything like normal. Gillian?
Thank you for that reporting. Stay safe out there. Coming up later in the show, California Congressman John Garamendi joins us to discuss President Trump's federal disaster declaration for California. Is it actually helping the communities in the fire-ravaged state? He'll answer.
Americans' election headquarters in the midterms aren't over yet. Pictures there of Lauderhill, Florida, Broward County Supervisor of Elections as the counting and recounting continues. Broward and Palm Beach counties being where the focus is right now. Peter Ducey live on the ground in Lauderhill. Peter, how long is this going to go on for?
Not much longer here, Leland, but we did just finally get the net gains for each candidate yesterday. Bill Nelson, the Democrat, during this hand recount managed to pick up about 250 votes on Rick Scott. That is far, far short of what the Democrats' campaign has been hoping for, because he does trail by more than 12,000 votes. So 200-300 ballots not going to make a huge difference here. There's also been some major confusion, though, aside from those hard numbers at the canvassing board, because election officials had said they were done with the Senate recount and they were going to move on to a hand recount of some of the ballots in the agricultural commissioner's race. But one of the Republican attorneys today, who was watching everything unfold, realized that 47 envelopes filled with ballots had little stickers that they were supposed to be a part of yesterday's recount, the Senate race. And that led to immediate objections that ballots were mixed together in a way that they weren't supposed to be, and concerns that some could be counted twice. Ultimately, the error was caught before affecting the count, but it added a lot of time to the hand recount process, which has not been producing the number of ballots that Democrat Senator Bill Nelson needs in this heavily Democratic area to catch Rick Scott and take over first place. The Nelson campaign also struck out in federal court last night because they had been fighting to count thousands of ballots that came in after the 7 p.m. deadline on election night, but that would require stretching the state election law to accommodate the Nelson recount effort, and Judge Mark Walker said he would not do it. The judge also said that his dance card is free for this weekend, so if anybody has a challenge for the court or an appeal, just to call him at any time. This has been an extended campaign that has been fought in the courts, so there might be some action up north in Tallahassee today, but we'll just have to wait and see. Leland?
What is the earliest conceivably, Peter, that we could get a final result on the Senate race and the governor's race?
It could theoretically come at any time, but Tuesday morning is when the Secretary of State is expected to certify the results of the election in the gubernatorial race and in the Senate race. So there's always the possibility that there could be an immediate challenge, but the math is very, very difficult for Bill Nelson, because in a place like this where they were hoping to find thousands of ballots in this hand recount. It just didn't happen. A big part of the reason is because there were an overwhelming majority of recounted ballots where nobody voted. It's called an undervote. They just left the Senate slate blank. So somebody, even if they voted for the Democrat Gillum for governor, they left the Senate race blank. Bad news for Bill Nelson.
Yeah, and as you pointed out, even worse math for Andrew Gillum to try to overcome Rick DeSantis. Good to see you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
For more on this, let's bring in Ted Harvey. He's the chairman of the Committee to Defend the President. Ted, thanks for being with us this weekend. I want to start with the Florida recount. What is so terrible about making sure that every last legitimate vote is counted in these races?
There's nothing wrong with making sure that every legitimate legal vote is counted. I think everybody wants to make sure that when we close this up on Tuesday, that everybody is satisfied that every vote was counted and that we have an honest election.
So Republicans are sort of, you know, the bad news, the drumbeat of bad news for Democrats continues in the state. Once Republicans win the elections conceivably, what is the plan to rectify this problem? Isn't the bigger story here mismanagement?
Well, I think that this is a big state with a lot of voters, and you have some counties like Broward County that it has some issues that the state election commission needs to deal with. I think that in the future, moving forward, especially going into the presidential election in 2020, we've got to get these issues taken care of, because we don't want to have another 2000 where they're literally looking at every state ballot to make sure who won, and we can't afford to do that in a presidential election.
Right, Ted, but isn't the governor ultimately responsible for managing that?
Well, I think the governor and the state's election commission is responsible for that. So hopefully they can, you know, the new governor can satisfy those problems and make sure that everybody is secure in knowing that their vote is going to be counted and will be legitimate.
I mean, critics here will say, yes, there's rampant mismanagement in Florida. This is nothing new. Republican leadership has done little to help remedy that problem. That's why we're here in the first place. So what's your explanation?
Well, he's not responsible for Broward County's election commissioner doing her job or not doing her job. This has been an area since 2000 where they've had serious problems in Broward County, and here we go again 18 years later where we still have problems. They need to deal with that situation on a local level, and dealing with fraud and corruption in the way they manage their voting is another thing we need to look at, not only in Florida but around the country.
Well, speaking of fraud and corruption and witch hunts, I want to get your take on the latest in the Mueller probe. Democrats are threatening now government shutdown if they don't get legislation to protect Mueller's investigation. Doesn't sound like a terrible idea to me in light of everything the president said. What do you say?
Well, what has the president said? The president has been saying for 2 years that he's not going to shut down the Mueller investigation. He wants it to go forward.
But yet on a daily basis, he continues, he persists in calling it a witch hunt, and calling it illegitimate.
It is a witch hunt. It is illegitimate, but he's not going to shut it down. The political process is going forward. The legal process is going forward. He's been saying for years that he's not going to shut it down. The Democrats are just trying to find something to
Ted,
make an issue out of with the president.
Can you really blame them? I mean, in light of the rhetoric from the president, in light of what Whitaker, the acting attorney general himself, has said. I didn't say that the president has said he's shutting it down. But you can't deny the fact that the president attacks the witch hunt, attacks the probe as a witch hunt on a pretty much a weekly basis. If I was a Democrat, I'd be very nervous and I'd want to batten down the hatches.
If I was being falsely accused of a crime, I would be calling it a witch hunt. And that is exactly what is going on with this situation. There is plenty of proof from the Inspector General's reports that shows that the FBI knew that there was nothing here. There was testimony before the committees saying that there was nothing here. Comey said that there was nothing here, yet we still have the Mueller investigation going forward. If I was Trump, I would be very defensive as well, and I would be calling it a witch hunt as well. That's not saying he's going to call it to an end. He's just defending himself, and I would too.
All right. Well, Ted Harvey, thanks for your time this morning. We'll talk to you again soon, sir.
Thank you. Have a great Thanksgiving.
You too.
All right, in Georgia, Democrat candidate Stacey Abrams has acknowledged the end of her race for governor and defeat by her opponent, Republican Brian Kemp. Take a listen.
Last night, as you all know, my opponent ended her campaign. The election is over, and I'm honored to be Georgia's governor-elect.
Well, there was a speech last night by Abrams. It was scathing, acknowledging Kemp's victory, but also highlighting what she calls voter suppression.
I acknowledge that former Secretary of State Brian Kemp will be certified as the victor in the 2018 gubernatorial election. But to watch an elected official who claims to represent the people in this state baldly pin his hopes for election on the suppression of the people's democratic right to vote has been truly appalling. So let's be clear. This is not a speech of concession.
In Utah, an updated vote count now has incumbent Republican Congresswoman Mia Love ahead by a razor-thin margin. The latest numbers show she's up just 419 votes against Democrat Ben McAdams, the current mayor of Salt Lake City. Utah is one of the 6 remaining undecided races in the House. So far, Democrats leading Republicans with 231 to 198 seats.
All right, now, who will the Democrats pick as Speaker? President Trump offering some surprising across-the-aisle support this morning for Nancy Pelosi.
I would help Nancy Pelosi if she needs some votes. She may need some votes. I will perform a wonderful service for her. I like her. Can you believe it? I like Nancy Pelosi. I mean, she's tough and she's smart, but she deserves to be Speaker.
Depends on how you do the head count. As it stands now, the California Democrat may not have enough votes from her own party to reclaim the gavel in January. Rhode Island Congressman David Cicilline is running for the number 4 position in Democratic leadership. Joining us now. The president trolling you guys, or you take him at his word?
Look, I think the president is right. Nancy Pelosi is smart and tough, but she will be elected Speaker with Democratic votes. What's most important is we'll get to work immediately, getting the work done of the American people. Okay. We ran on a very specific agenda and we're going to hit the ground running.
That was an answer to a question, just not the question I asked. You take the president at face value?
I have no idea. Look, Nancy Pelosi doesn't need Donald Trump's support. Democrats will elect their leadership. The Republicans will elect their leadership. I have every confidence that we'll elect a leadership team led by Speaker Pelosi and
hold on. You say the president, Nancy Pelosi doesn't need the president's support. There are at least 17 Democrats on record saying they do not support Nancy Pelosi for Speaker. There were a number of Democrats who ran on a platform in swing districts saying they do not support Nancy Pelosi for Speaker. Isn't that a problem?
Look, I think there is no question that we will have a leadership team led by Speaker Pelosi and a leadership team that reflects the full and wonderful diversity of our caucus.
But isn't it a problem if you have a leader who is so polarizing in swing districts, so toxic that Democrats had to run saying, I won't vote for her? Look, you're asking new members to break their pledge.
Look, I think what will happen is Nancy Pelosi will get the majority of votes in our caucus. She will get the votes on the floor and become a Speaker. There will be some Democrats who won't support her. Look, this is a great problem to have. We have 57 new members, lots of new ideas, lots of great contributions. We're having a family discussion about who's going to lead our caucus. That's healthy for our democracy. It's healthy for Democrats. Out of this process will come a great and strong leadership team that will reflect the diversity of our caucus, and that will be sure that we hit the ground running, driving down health care costs, rebuilding our country,
all the things,
raising family incomes, and taking on the corrupting influence of money in our political system. That's what matters.
Okay, I understand all the things you want to do. The fact of the matter remains, and I'll hopefully get an answer to the question, you're asking Democrats, by definition of the math, who pledged to not support Nancy Pelosi, in order to get the votes,
that's not true. That's not true. Every person will vote their conscience. They will vote.
Right, but a number of you, in order to get Democratic votes to make Nancy Pelosi Speaker, in order for the math to work, by definition, there will be people who will have to vote against their pledge to support Nancy Pelosi for Speaker.
That's not true. Nancy Pelosi will get enough votes from Democrats to become the Speaker of the House. And there will be some people who campaigned on not voting for her. I expect they'll keep that commitment.
If they keep that commitment, the way the math works, you don't end up there.
In the end, Nancy Pelosi will have a majority of the votes on the floor to make her Speaker of the House. That's my prediction. But guess what? We're going to have this discussion in the Democratic caucus when we come back. We're going to elect our leadership.
Okay, let me ask you a different way. Clearly, there are other, in the 200-plus members of the House of Representatives who are Democrats, there are clearly those that are talented, that are powerful fundraisers, that are dedicated leaders, that know the House, know the Hill, and have been here for a long time. Why is the Democrats hanging their hat on one person, Nancy Pelosi, who is so toxic to so much of the country?
Yeah.
She has lower unfavorables than the president does.
First of all, we're not relying on one person. We have a strong and diverse caucus. We have great leadership. The DPCC, Hakeem Jeffries, Sherry Bustos, and I worked very hard. The DCCC chair, Ben Ray, did a great job. Jim Clyburn, Steny Hoyer. We have lots of new people in leadership. And so I expect that when we have our leadership elections, we're going to elect a team that reflects the talent and the diversity of our caucus. And Nancy Pelosi, let me just finish. Nancy Pelosi has been a very effective speaker. She brought us the Affordable Care Act. She brought us Wall Street reform. She brought us the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Millions and millions of Americans now have health care because of the work of Nancy Pelosi.
Nobody will argue that she's effective.
She's an effective legislator, and it's like, you know what? When you just won the Super Bowl, you don't fire the quarterback.
Or the person who raised you the most money either.
It's not just about the money. It's about we have talented candidates.
And diversity.
No, we have great talented candidates.
We got to go.
All right.
We're up against a hard break. I don't want the computer to cut you off.
Thanks
we'll
very
see you
much.
soon. Thank you.
All right, coming up, migrants from across Central America are now gathering at the U.S. border. Correspondent William LaJeunesse is on the ground. William?
Well, with shelters filling up and tensions heating up, what is next?
They do. Aboard this one, 7,400 pounds of goods, including, this sounds appetizing, a dehydrated Thanksgiving dinner for the 3-person crew of the International Space Station. Hopefully it gets there in time.
Thousands of Central American migrants have arrived at the Mexican border city of Tijuana. President Trump talked about them before leaving the White House this morning. Here's what he said.
We have a tremendous military force on the border, on the southern border. We have large numbers of people trying to get into our country. They come up and they're talking about all their great fear, all their problems with their country, but they're all waving their country's flag. What is that all about?
William LaJeunesse is reporting from Tijuana, Mexico, with the latest. William?
Well, not even the migrants themselves know what happens next. I did talk to a guy with a Honduran flag this morning about the president calling him out, and he said, basically, I'm not doing it for my country, I am doing it for my people. But having said that, this is the main shelter behind me. Now, there are concerns here because there are about 2,000 people here, but we're expecting twice that. So where are they all going to go? Not only about shelter, but food as well. And that's because this is the food line for breakfast, right? So this has been going on for about an hour and a half people have been here. So they are massively uninformed, Jillian, I have to tell you. Unlike those who hire coyotes, these people don't know where they're going or how they're going to get there, even as buses continue to arrive here in Tijuana. We spoke earlier to a 14-year-old Guatemala boy and his father in Mexicali, about 60 miles away. Now, I said 2,600 here, 3,200 expected today and tomorrow. Now, the mayor says, hey, it's one thing to pass through, but we don't want you to stay, as the state believes, 6 to 18 months. They're arriving here with blind faith, hoping they sought to claim asylum and get released, but now they're realizing that is no longer the case.
We could go here and it's like 10 minutes just to walk and to get there, but everyone's going to Tijuana, so we're still not sure what we're going to do, but that's why we're trying to find information what's best to take and what route to take and what not to take, what options.
So what about those options? Well, number one, they could go home. People here say they're not going to do that. They could enter illegally. Some say they will do that. They could stay here and work and get money for a coyote. A number of people told me that's what they're planning to do. They could claim asylum in Mexico. Many don't want to stay here, however, or they could wait in line, claim asylum in the United States. But Jillian, right now, the wait, right, is 5 weeks already to get an appointment. Just put your name on the list to see an asylum officer. Many are not willing to wait that long. And do they have the money? Does Tijuana have the patience to support them for that long? Those are unanswered questions that will develop over the next days and weeks. Back to you.
William, thanks for that.
All right, North Korea bragging about their latest weapons test. What does this mean for another possible summit with Kim Jong-un? And smoke from the California wildfires causing major problems across the state. So, when will Mother Nature offer some relief? Adam Klotz standing by in the Fox Extreme Weather Center. Hi, Adam.
Hey there, Leland. Weather conditions actually improved the last...
See it from space. And all of that is causing some serious air quality problems across San Francisco and other cities in California. You can see people there. The mailwoman there is wearing a mask, as is the UPS driver. Adam Klotz in the Fox Extreme Weather Center for more on the smoke's impact. Hi, Adam.
Hey there, Leland. It continues to be an issue, and these winds have shifted once again. So not surprised that some of these major cities along the coast are dealing with some of those fires. Here's where our high fire danger is currently, as the conditions, again, bone dry humidity, the winds picking back up. We've got red flag warnings again in north central California, an area where the fires have really been going. There's Paradise. Each one of these little lines is a wind barb, and that's showing the direction of the wind. So it's picking up all these locations where the fires are and where the fire danger is still high, and pushing it. Even though there isn't a fire in San Francisco, those winds coming again out of the east, pushing west, driving all that smoke. Unfortunately, smoke's going to be an issue throughout the entire weekend. Now, for the first time in a long time, I can say that there is rain on the horizon. It just isn't going to be here immediately. Here's what we're looking at as our future cast, and I did just run you all the way from Saturday stays bone dry, Sunday stays dry, Monday stays dry. You begin to see a little bit of precipitation off the coast by the time you get into early next week. It probably won't be until the middle of the week, but there is going to be some much needed rain moving in across portions of Northern California. This is now beginning to think about the Thanksgiving week that's heading ahead. But here's your travel week in the next week, and you begin to see clear across the country, but a large system is going to be moving into the western half of the country, and that eventually is going to need some rain in areas where they are desperately needing it. Showers moving in by late Tuesday into Wednesday, covering large portions there of California, stretching up into the northeast. That is going to be continuing then on to Thursday also. So rain, guys, here eventually is on the way, but at least here through the weekend, into the early part of the week, the winds are going to be there, unfortunately, and it is going to stay dry. But finally, we have something to look forward to.
All right, Adam,
Leland.
thanks so much.
Yep.
Jillian's got more.
Yeah, let's bring in California Congressman John Garamendi. Sir, thanks for being with us. You know, condolences to everyone across your state. This has been gutting and devastating to watch from here in Washington.
Well, it's from California view, it is just horrible, tragic, and it's not over yet. We're going to find more people that have been killed by these fires, and it's bad. It's never been this bad.
So President Trump is in your state today to visit victims, to visit fire sites, to survey damage. I want you to take a listen to what he told Fox News Sunday anchor Chris Wallace yesterday. Take a listen to this. I want to get your reaction.
What about the argument it's climate change, that it's drier, it's hotter, and that's contributing to it?
Maybe it contributes a little bit. The big problem we have is management.
Okay, so let's unpack that. The president admitting that perhaps climate change is not a hoax.
Well, climate change is very, very real. You don't have to look beyond California to learn that. It's drier, it's hotter. The fire season is not 9 months of the year. It's 12 months of the year, all of Southern California. And now, as it moves north into Northern California, it is all the time. We get heavy rains, yes. They're short-lived. Vegetation grows fast, and then it dries out very, very fast because it is hotter and drier. You just heard about the hot, dry north winds. Climate change is a very real part of this problem, no doubt about it. But also, it is the management. The forests have not been properly managed for the last 70 years. We've always been trying to suppress fires in the forest, which have led, together with other forest practices, to an overgrowth of the forest. However, the fire in Paradise is not in a national forest. It is on private lands.
Sir, it sounds like you're conceding a point here. The president has a point. Mismanagement is playing a part in the tragedy we're seeing unfold this week.
Well, I'm not sure I'd use the word mismanagement. I'd just say that we have to go back to the natural management of the forest. Logging is a part of that process, as is natural fires. We need to thin the forest. Fortunately, we were able, after 5 years of effort, to modify the way in which the Forest Service is funded. Most of their funding in the previous years was consumed fighting fires, and no money was left over to manage the forest.
Okay,
we now
so
have a new process in place.
Congressman, there's budgeting, and then there's also what the president has pointed out. appear to be firefighters, first responders, volunteers clearing brush from really dry areas that spark very easily. These kinds of areas where there's a lot of brush are responsible for spreading the fire as quickly as it has. He's kind of making the argument that they need to be quicker on the draw here. Why wasn't all of this cleared out days ago when the fire first started, or months ago?
Well, California is a huge state. And we are now having almost 40 million people in the state. They're moving into the outlying areas, into what we call the urban wildland interface areas. Yes, it is required that there be at least 100 feet of open space around all dwellings in California. But when you get the kind of explosive fire that has devastated the town of Paradise, some 26,000 people, you could have 100, you can have 1,000 feet around, but that fire is jumping at least 2 to 3 miles, well, at least a mile to 2 ahead, because the wind is blowing the embers. And so, yes, we do need to provide much better fire protection. Our forests need to be managed. That is going to happen now that we have a different funding mechanism in place. We also need to recognize that climate change is part of the problem. So how do we build resilient, safe communities? And that has to do with the structure of the houses. It has to do with another issue that, interestingly enough, Senator Markey in Massachusetts and a couple of us from California and the Midwest introduced a bill called ESCAPE, and it provides money for state and localities to develop escape routes, evacuation routes. Principal problem in the Paradise issue was that there was 2 roads out of town, both of them narrow, both of them with heavy brush along the side of the road, and many of the people, if not most of them, died as they were trying to escape the fire. So this piece of legislation
I'm sorry to interrupt
may work.
you. We've got a wrap coming up. I want to just ask you yes or no. Before I let you go, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about Nancy Pelosi. Are you going to vote for her for next Speaker of the House?
Absolutely. I voted for her before. I vote for her again. She's an extraordinary leader, very strong, very powerful, very wise, and she knows the intricacies not only of the process, but of the policies. She will become our Speaker, and she will